Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back with more Eat, Shoots, and Leaves. I'm going to go ahead and try to finish the chapter with this episode. Um, but doing that, it's going to be a little long. But with that said, let's go ahead and just bear with me here. When Amifil mentioned quotation marks as an annoyance in the philosopher's pupil, he was not objecting to those that indicate actual quotations. Inverted commas, or speech marks, or quotes, are sometimes used by fastidious writers as a kind of linguistic rubber glove, distancing them from vulgar words or cliches that they are too refined to use in the normal way. This in character in Iris Murdoch's novel evidently can't bring himself to keep in touch without sealing it hygienically within inverted commas, and doubtless additionally indicating his irony with two pairs of curled fingers held up at either side of his face. In newspapers, similar inverted commas are sometimes known as scare quotes, as when a headline says Britain buys wrong vaccine, Robert Maxwell dead, or dead man eaten in gruesome cat horror. Such inverted commas, usually single rather than double, are understood by readers to mean that there is some authority for this story, perhaps even a quotable source, but that the newspaper itself won't yet state it as fact. Evidently, there is no legal protection provided by such weaselly inverted commas. If you assert someone is lying, it's pretty much the same in law as saying he is lying. And we all know the dead man was definitely eaten by those gruesome cats. Otherwise, no one would have raised the possibility. The interesting thing is how this practice relates to the advertisement of pizzas in quite large supermarket chains. To those of us accustomed to newspaper headlines, pizzas, and inverted commas suggest these might be pizzas, but no one's promising anything. And if they turn out to be cardboard with a bit of cheese on top, then you can't say you weren't warned. There is a huge amount of ignorance concerning the use of quotation marks. A catalog will advertise that its pineapple ring slicer works just like a compass. Why? Why doesn't it work just like a compass? There is a serious cognitive problem highlighted here. I think a real misunderstanding is that misunderstanding of what writing is. Nigel Hall, a reader in literacy education at Manchester Metropolitan University, who studies the way children learn to punctuate, told me about one small boy who peppered his work with quotation marks, regardless of whether it was reporting any speech. Why did he do that? Because it's all me talking, the child explained, and I imagine it was hard to argue against such immaculate logic. It seems to me that the pizza's people who put signs in their windows, now open Sundays, thank you for not smoking, have the same problem as this little boy. If they are saying this thing, announcing it, then they feel that logically they have to present it in speech marks because it's all them talking. Comfortable though we are with our modern usage, it has taken a long time to evolve and will, of course, evolve further. So we mustn't get complacent. Until the beginning of the 18th century, quotation marks were used in England only to call attention to sententious remarks. Then, in 1714, someone had the idea of using them to denote direct speech, and by the time of the first edition of Henry Fielding's Tom Jones in 1749, inverted commas were used by printers both to contain the speech and to indicate in a general left-hand marginal way that there was speech going on. Here the book dropped from her hand, and a shower of tears ran down into her bosom. In this situation she had continued a minute, when the door opened, and in came Lord Fellamar. Sophia started from her chair at his entrance, and his lordship, advancing forwards and making a low bow, said, "I am afraid, Miss Western, I break in upon you abruptly." "Indeed, my lord," says she, "I must own myself a little surprised at this unexpected visit." "If this visit be unexpected, madam," answered Lord Fellamar, "my eyes must have been very faithless interpreters of my heart. Since the 18th century, we have standardized the use of quotation marks, but only up to a point. Readers are obliged to get used to the idea from an early age that double or single is a question not applicable only to beds, tennis, and cream. We see both double and single quotation marks every day, assimilate both, and try not to think about it. Having been trained to use double quotation marks for speech, however, with single quotation for quotations within quotations, I grieve to see the rule applied the other way around. There is a difference between saying someone is out of sorts, a direct quote, and out of sorts, i.e. not feeling very well. When single quotes serve both functions, you lose this distinction. Also, with the poor apostrophe already confusing people so much, a sentence that begins with a single quote and contains an apostrophe after 3 or 4 words is quite confusing typographically, because you automatically assume the apostrophe is the closing quotation mark. "I was at St. Thomas's Hospital," she said. There is, too, a gulf between American usage and our own, with Americans always using double quotation marks and American grammarians insisting that if a sentence ends with a phrase in inverted commas, all the terminal punctuation for the sentence must come tidily inside the speech marks, even when this doesn't seem to make sense. Sophia asked Lord Fellamar if he was out of his senses. The British version. Sophia asked Lord Fellamar if he was out of his senses. American version. Since where and when to put the punctuations in direct speech is a real bother to some people, here are some basic rules. When a piece of dialogue is attributed at its end, conclude that a comma inside the inverted conclude it with a comma inside the inverted commas. When a you are out of your senses, Lord Felomar, gasped Sophia. When the dialogue is attributed at the start, conclude with a full stop inside the inverted commas. Lord Felomar replied, Love has so totally deprived me of reason that I am scarce accountable for my actions. When the dialogue stands on its own, the full stop comes inside the inverted commas. Upon my word, my lord, I neither understand your words nor your behavior. When only a fragment of speech is being quoted, put punctuation outside the inverted commas. Sophia recognized in Lord Felomar the effects of frenzy and tried to break away. When a quotation is a question or exclamation, the terminal marks come inside the inverted commas. Am I really to conceive your lordship to be out of his senses? Cried Sophia. Unhand me, sir, she demanded. But when the question is posed by the sentence rather than by the speaker, logic demands that the question mark goes in outside the inverted commas. Why didn't Sophia see at once that his lordship doted on her to the highest degree of distraction? Where the quoted speech is a full sentence requiring a full stop or other terminal mark of its own, and coincidentally comes at the end of a containing sentence, the mark inside the inverted commas serves for both. When fetching a deep sigh, he ran on for some minutes in a strain which would be little more pleasing to the reader than it was to the lady, and at last concluded with a declaration that if he was master of the world, he would lay it at her feet. The basic rule is straightforward and logical. When the punctuation relates to the quoted words, it goes inside the inverted commas. When it relates to the sentence, it goes outside. Unless, of course, you are in America. So far in this chapter, we have looked at punctuation that encourages the reader to inflect words mentally in a straightforwardly emphatic way. Hello! Hello? 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 But, as many classically trained actors will tell you, it can be just as effective to lower your voice for emphasis as to raise it. Poets and writers know this too, which is where dashes and brackets come in. Both of these marks ostensibly muffle your volume and flatten your tone. Used carefully, they can do more to make a point than any page and a half of italics. Here are some literary dashes. He learned the arts of riding, fencing, gunnery, and how to scale a fortress, or a nunnery. Let love therefore be what it will. My Uncle Toby fell into it. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves. and immortality. The dash is nowadays seen as the enemy of grammar, partly because of the overtly disorganized thought. Because overtly disorganized thought is the mode of most email and mobile phone text communication, and the dash does its annoyingly good job in these contexts, standing in for other punctuation marks. I saw Jim. He looked great. Have you seen him? What time is the thing tomorrow? See you there. Why is the dash the mark a la mode? Because it is easy to use, perhaps, and because it is hard to use wrongly, but also because it is simply easy to see. Full stop and commas are often quite tiny in modern typefaces, whereas the handsome horizontal dash is a lot harder to miss. However, just as the exclamation mark used to be the persona non grata on old typewriter keyboards, so you may often hunt in vain for the dash nowadays. On my own Apple keyboard, I have been for years discouraged from any stream of consciousness writing by the belief that I had to make my own quasi-dashes from illicit double taps on the hyphen. When I discovered a week ago that I could make a true dash by employing the Alt key with the hyphen, it was truly one of the red letter days of my life. Meanwhile, the distinction between the big bow dash and its little brother, the hyphen, is evidently blurring these days and requires explanation, whereas a dash is generally concerned to connect or separate phrases and sentences. The tiny tricksy hyphen used above in such phrases as quasi-dashes, double taps, and stream of consciousness is used quite distinctly to connect or separate individual words. Are dashes intrinsically unserious? Certainly in abundance they suggest baroque and hyperactive silliness, as exemplified by the breathless Miss Bates in Jane Austen's Emma. How do you do? How do you all do? Quite well. I am obliged to meet you. Never better. Don't I hear another carriage? Who can this be? Very likely the worthy Coles. Upon my word, this is charming to be standing about among such friends and such a noble fire. I am quite roasted. Yet the dash need not be silly. The word has identical roots with the verb to dash, deriving from the Middle English verb dashen, meaning to knock, to hurl, to break. And the point is that a single dash creates a dramatic disjunction which can be exploited for humor, for bathos, for shock. Wait for it. The single dash seems to whisper, with a twinkle, if you're lucky. Byron is a great master of the dramatic dash. A little still she strove, and much repented, and whispering, I will ne'er consent. Consented. A comma just wouldn't cut the mustard there, especially with the meter hurrying you along. Meanwhile, Emily Dickinson's extraordinary penchant for dashes has been said to mirror into her own synapses, symbolizing the analogical leaps and flashes of advanced cognition. Either that, or, of course, or she used a typewriter from which all the other punctuation keys had been sadistically removed. Double dashes are another matter. These are a bracketing device, and the only issue is when to use brackets when dashes. The difference can be quite subtle, but compare these two. He was, I still can't believe this, trying to climb in the window. He was, I can't believe this, trying to climb in the window. Is one version preferable to the other? Reading both aloud, it would be hard to tell them apart. But as they sit on the page, it seems to me that the brackets half remove the intruding aside, half suppress it, while the dashes warmly welcome it in with open arms. Brackets come in various shapes, types, and names. 1. Round brackets, which we call brackets and the Americans call parentheses. 2. Square brackets, which we call square brackets and the Americans call brackets. 3. Brace brackets, which are shaped thus and derived from maths. 4. Angle brackets, used in paleography, linguistics, and other technical specialisms. The angle shape was the earliest to appear, but in the 16th century, Erasmus gave the attractive name lunulae to round brackets, in reference to their moon-like profile. The word bracket, one of the few English punctuation words not to derive from Greek or Latin, comes from the same German root as brace and breeches, and originally referred, deep down you knew this, to the kind of bracket that holds up a bookshelf. The idea that in writing brackets lift up a section of a sentence, holding it a foot or two above the rest, is rather satisfying. For the reader, however, the important thing is that this lift and hold business doesn't last too long, because there is a certain amount of anxiety created once a bracket has been opened that is not dissipated until it's bloody well closed again. As Oliver Wendell Holmes remarked so beautifully, one has to dismount from an idea and get into the saddle again at every parenthesis. Writers who place whole substantive passages in brackets can't possibly appreciate the existential suffering they inflict. When a bracket opens halfway down a left-hand page and the closing bracket is giddyingly nowhere in sight, it's like being in a play by Jean-Paul Sartre. However, there are plenty of legitimate usages of brackets. First, to add information, to clarify, to explain, to illustrate. Tom Jones, 1749, was considered such a lewd book that when 2 earthquakes occurred in London in 1750, Fielding's book was blamed for them. Starburst, formerly known as Opal Fruits, are available in all corner shops. Robert Maxwell wasn't dead yet. He was still suing people. Second, brackets are perfect for our authorial asides of various kinds. The exclamation mark is sometimes called, really, a dog's cock. Tom Jones was blamed for some earthquakes. Isn't that interesting? Square brackets are quite another thing. They are the editor's way of clarifying the meaning of a direct quote without actually changing any of the words. She had used it, Tom Jones, for quite a number of examples now. Obviously, the text only says it at this point, but the editor needs to be more specific, so inserts of information inside square brackets. It is quite alright to replace the it, actually. She had used Tom Jones for far too many examples by this stage. Square brackets are most commonly used around the word sic from the Latin sicut, meaning just as, to explain the status of an apparent mistake. Generally, sic means the foregoing mistake or apparent mistake was made by the writer-speaker. I am quoting, I am but the faithful messenger. In fact, I never get anything wrong myself. She asked for a packet of Starburst, SIC. Book reviewers in particular adore the use SIC. It makes them feel terrific because what it means is that they've spotted this apparent mistake. Thank you, so there is no point writing in. However, there are distinctions with SIC. It can signify two different things. One, this isn't a mistake, actually. It just looks like one to the casual eye. I am grateful to Miss Bollock, SIC, for the following examples. 2. Tee-hee, what a dreadful error. But it would be dishonest of me to correct it. Please send me a copy of the Times, SIC, he wrote. Square brackets also sometimes enclose the ellipses, which when words are left out. Thus, but a more lucky circumstance happened to poor Sophia. Another noise broke forth, which almost drowned her cries. The door flew open, and in came Squire Western, with his parson and a set of myrmidons at his heels. I recently heard of someone studying the ellipsis, or 3 dots, for a PhD, and I have to say I was horrified. The ellipsis is the black hole of punctuation, of the punctuation universe, surely, into which no right-minded person would willingly be sucked for 3 years with no guarantee of a job at the end. But at least when this thesis is complete, he may tell us whether rumors are true and that Miss Henry Wood's dead and never called me mother in the stage version of East Lynne was really the first time it was used. Newspapers sometimes use the ellipsis interchangeably with the dash, which can be quite irritating, as its proper uses are quite specific and very few. 1. To indicate words missing from a quoted passage. 2. To trail off into an intriguing manner, which is always a good way to end anything, of course, in an intriguing manner. When you consider the power of erotic suggestion contained in the traditional three-dot chapter ending, he swept her into his arms. She was powerless to resist. All she knew was she loved him. It's a bit of a come down for the ellipsis to be used as a subspecies of the dash. Perhaps the final word on the ellipsis should go to Peter Cook in this Pete and Dud sketch from BBC Two's Not Only But Also in 1966. My memory was that the title of this show contained an ellipsis itself, not only, but also. But in modern references, the ellipsis has been removed, which only goes to show you can't rely on anything anymore. Anyway, Pete Cook's musing on the significance of the three dots is quite as good a philosophical moment as Tom Stoppard's critics Moon and Birdboot in The Real Inspector Hound arguing about whether you can start a play with a pause. Pete is explaining to Dud how a bronze pilot approaches a woman on a dusty runway in Neville shoots a town like Alice. A woman who perfectly defined busty substances have been outlined underneath her frail poplin dress by a shower of rain and then the tremendous rushing wind from his propellers. Dud. What happened to after that, Pete? Pete. Well, the bronze pilot goes up to her and they walk away and the chapter ends in three dots. Dud. What do those three dots mean, Pete? Pete. Well, in Shoot's hands, three dots can mean anything. Dud. How's your father, perhaps? Pete. When Shoot uses three dots, it means use your imagination. Conjure the scene up for yourself. Whenever I see three dots, I feel all funny. But yeah, we'll go ahead and end that there as it ends the actual chapter. So yeah, the author gives us some suggestions on things, the usage of the ellipsis, brackets, SIC as part of the brackets talk. Let's see. When she's talking about brackets, of course we know those, which we call parentheses here in the U.S. We know which we call just brackets here in the U.S. Now the brace brackets you'll often see as yeah, which you'll often see in mathematical equations when you get into the more missing part maths, such as algebra and calculus and stuff like that. And then, of course, the angle brackets. That's what they're talking about there. The use of the dash. The way words can be said. If you've got an exclamation, hello! If you got a question mark, hello? they don't have anything but italics. Hello. And then quotation marks around it indicating someone said hello. Let's see. And they talk quite a bit about the use of quotations, where to put the marks and stuff, single or double quotation marks. Early on, she gives them us scare quotes. Britain buys wrong vaccine. So it's a double quote, Britain buys, and then in single quotes, boom, boom, they got wrong. And then it continues vaccine, the double quote, ending the actual full phrase. Robert Maxwell dead. So you got double quotation marks, Robert Maxwell, single quotation, dead, single quotation, and then to finish the sentence, double quotations. And then they have dead man eaten in gruesome cat horror. Double quotation, dead man, single quotation, eaten, single quotation, in gruesome cat horror, double quotation. She also calls them inverted commas, but yeah, it's quotation marks. But with that, next episode, it says the title is A Little Used Punctuation Mark. Which, if I remember, I don't think that chapter is all that long. Yeah. 168 to 176. And like I said, the pages are short, so that one will be a quick one. And then that finishes out Merely Conventional Signs, the chapter after that. It's a bit longer. And that ends the book. So we are on the last two chapters. The next one's easy. I'll be able to do it in a single episode. The last one, maybe 2-3 episodes. But yeah, we're almost done with the book. Like I said, I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. Grammar, punctuation. But I find it cute and amusing, so I figured I'd read it. But anyway, with that said, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.